Welcome back to Educating Isabella, Rock and Roll 101, the podcast where we introduce you to the music and artists who got us to where we are today. I'm Michael, and today we continue our deep dive into one of rock's true architects, Chuck Berry. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I'd suggest going back and listening before tackling this episode, in the name of having a complete picture of this complex man. The man who Jerry Lee Lewis's own mother once announced to her son, "Well, you and Elvis are pretty good, but you're no Chuck Berry."
Educating Isabella, here the tales unfold. Is rocks bringing legends bold. From the riffs to the licks and the rebels call. It's the heart and soul of it all.
In part 1, we trace the birth of rock and roll, from the first spark of Maybelline to the stardom of Johnny B. Goode and the explosion that echoed across the Atlantic. Now, in part 2, we explore the other side of the story, the struggles, the controversies, and the stubborn brilliance of a man who lived his life by his own rules. This is Chuck Berry, The Price of Greatness. By the late 1950s, Berry was one of the biggest stars in America. He was a black man commanding stages across a racially divided country, selling records to teenagers of every color. That alone made him a revolutionary figure, but it also made him a target. In 1959, his world crashed. Berry was arrested and later convicted under the Mann Act, accused of transporting a minor across state lines. He served almost 2 years in prison. The details remain disputed even today, but one thing is certain: when he emerged, the landscape of popular music had shifted, and so had he. He was bitter and more difficult, if that was possible, to work with. Elvis had been drafted and returned. New stars were rising. Yet the young bands in Britain and America who idolized him, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys, were now spreading his sound across the globe. Just take a listen to the Beach Boys' Surfin' USA, a barely disguised remake of Sweet Little 16. His name might have been tarnished, but his music had already seeded the future. When Berry walked free in 1963, many thought his career was over. Instead, he came roaring back. Returning to Chess Records, he wrote songs with the wit, humor, and edge that had always defined him. No Particular Place to Go, with its sly teenage innuendo, climbed the charts. You Never Can Tell, that wedding day waltz, proved he hadn't lost his gift for observation and groove. And Nadine showed he could still craft a story that jumped out of the speakers. But Berry was changed. The boyish grin had hardened. The trust was gone. He insisted on getting paid in cash before every show. He often arrived alone, renting local musicians rather than touring with a permanent band. Promoters complained. Fellow performers called him difficult. But Berry had seen too much of the industry's dark side, and he refused to be cheated again. Those who played with him tell stories of awe and frustration in equal measure. He'd walk on stage without rehearsing, call out a key, and expect the band to keep up. When they did, it was electric. When they didn't, it could be chaos. And yet, the moment he hit that first riff, that unmistakable opening to Johnny B. Goode, the crowd erupted every time. Whatever his moods, his artistry never deserted him. Then came 1972, and the surprise hit that no one saw coming, My Ding-a-Ling. A novelty sing-along recorded live in London, it reached #1 on the US charts and several other countries around the globe, Berry's only chart topper. Critics hated it, fans were puzzled, but Berry didn't care. He'd outlasted them all. It was proof that even his mischief could move millions. Still, beneath the humor and swagger, the years were taking their toll. Lawsuits, tax troubles, and more arrests shadowed him through the 1970s and 80s. He could be charming one moment and cutting the next. But for every scandal or clash, there was another generation of musicians citing him as the reason they'd picked up a guitar. By the mid-1980s, Berry had become both a legend and an enigma, a man respected, feared, and endlessly imitated. In 1986, the year the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame opened its doors for the first time, Chuck Berry was among the inaugural inductees. They called him the Poet Laureate of Rock and Roll. A year later, Keith Richards, the ultimate disciple, helped organize a tribute concert for Berry's 60th birthday. It was Keith's job to put an all-star band together to back and support Chuck, and he nailed it. Though more than a few of the big stars probably found Chuck demanding, shall we say. It became the documentary Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll. Keith Richards described working with Chuck Berry during the filming as being challenging, yet instructive, noting Berry gave him more headaches than Mick Jagger. It was during the filming of this movie that Berry famously gave Keith Richards a black eye for the crime of touching his guitar. "No one touches my guitar. Whack." Fortunately, Keith took the incident in good spirits, telling Chuck he would have probably done the same thing if he'd caught someone touching his guitar. Watching that film, you see both sides of him: the pride, the ego, the humor, and the genius. Richards once joked that playing with Chuck was like trying to keep up with a hurricane. Yet amid the tension, there was deep affection. Berry had earned his place in history, not because he was perfect, but because he was irreplaceable. In his final decades, Berry kept performing. He played small clubs, often in his hometown of St. Louis, still demanding cash, still duck-walking across the stage, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes barely holding it together. When he turned 90 in 2016, he announced one last album simply titled Chuck, his first new studio record in nearly 40 years. He didn't live to see its release. Chuck Berry died in March 2017 at the age of 90. Tributes poured in from every corner of the music world. Mick Jagger wrote, "He lit up our teenage years and blew life into our dreams." Bruce Springsteen called him the greatest pure rock and roll writer and performer who ever lived. And even modern artists like Ed Sheeran and Hozier spoke of his influence on the songs they grew up loving. Chuck Berry was complicated. He could be proud, stubborn, sometimes abrasive, but he was also a pioneer, a poet of everyday life, a visionary guitarist, and the man who gave rock and roll its attitude. Every riff that makes you want to move, every lyric that celebrates youth, freedom, and rebellion, they all trace back to him. His music crossed racial boundaries, inspired social change, and created the blueprint that still drives popular music today. So Isabella, here's your homework. Start by listening to Nadine, No Particular Place to Go, and My Ding-a-Ling. Then move forward and hear how his DNA runs through the Rolling Stones' Brown Sugar, Bruce Springsteen's She's the One, and even Hozier's Movement. You'll find them all, and plenty more, on our Educating Isabella playlists, available on Spotify, YouTube Music, and Deezer. Next time on Educating Isabella, we'll move from the roots of rock to one of the great bands of the 80s. We'll be taking a look at the band that defined the term New Romantics. Until then, keep listening, keep learning, keep dancing, and remember, genius is rarely simple, and the story of rock and roll was never meant to be tidy. It was meant to be loud, alive, and unforgettable, just like Chuck Berry. Rock on.